Alright, so now that we've got the front end done and there's a good viewable web page for customers to sort through different reviewers, we'll talk about who the customer is. A customer in this case could be multiple different groups of people. We're just using one term called client, but it could be an insurance company, could be an attorney, could be a physician's office that wants a medical record review done on one of their patients. So there's a lot of different clients, and the thought was that we need to create this engine so that it's reproducible, and then the landing page on different web domains uh, would essentially be targeted towards these different types of customers, but we would use the same process, the same review dashboard, etc. So of the functions that a client would need, regardless of what type of client it will, what kind of client it is, they need to upload and view secure records. They need to be notified that a review is done, and they need to be able to view and print that final review. There may be some instances where the client will want to interact with the reviewer, but we want to keep that to a minimum. We want that initial web form that the client fills out to tell the assistant and the reviewer basically everything the assistant and reviewer will need to know and the purpose of the review, and then that review just goes back to the client, and there's not a whole lot of interaction. Any of that interaction will eat into the reviewer's time and essentially make it so that our price point won't be any better than the current system that's out there now. So here's an example of our current website and the different types of clients just on this mock-up of the website. We're going to need a registration for any of the clients. In this case, it's an attorney. Just the basic demographics like this that you can submit, and then the client will be registered. There won't need to be any admin approval of a client registering. Any customer or client that wants to sign up would immediately become a user and be eligible to order a review. So getting back to our flow here, we're talking about the left-hand side where the client will be able to view the record and also be able to see the final PDF review that's done. So milestone 3, and certainly these milestones can be juggled and put in a different order, but one milestone we certainly need to do is the process of review ordering. We talked about this already. Web form is going to need to be filled out by the client, and that web form is going to have a drop-down menu for different types of reviews, and then the basic demographics that will essentially be fill in the blank items that the client customer will fill out. So some of those fields are actually, I'm going to say all those fields are going to be used downstream. The drop down menu of the different type of review is going to actually determine which highlight form that the assistant's going to use. The demographics and all the contact information, we'd like to bring that data from those fields right over into that highlight form. And of course, we will need to somehow tie this into the payment system. There's probably going to be 2 levels of review as far as cost, and if this is going to be a big endeavor to add this, we could simply use a one-tier pricing system to begin with, and then work on this down the road. So when a review is ordered, we're going to obviously need to have the reviewer be notified, and when a review is ordered, the client's dashboard needs to show that review going into the pending status, And once the reviewer does it, the client needs to be notified, and then the review goes into the completed status. Later on, we're going to talk about some alfresco add-ons, and one of them is a 5-star rating for documents, and perhaps we can use this already created add-on to allow the client to give a 1 to 5 rating of the review and feed that data back to that front landing page, the visible list of the reviewers, so that the reviewers have a performance or 5-star rating. So this is an alfresco online visualization or page, and I think this is going to give us the functionality that I'm looking for, and obviously it has different site contents, it has document abilities, it has task abilities, it has member abilities with different user access levels. We're going to need all those things. I mean, when you look at the document library, we're going to need to separate out the medical records depending on the person, and then each one will probably be in its own folder, and then we're going to need to make sure that we can look at things such as the ones that the doctor or the reviewer is editing versus the one that the assistant is editing. So these are all functions that I think alfresco provides a good foundation to achieve. So we talked about the disclosure form real briefly. When a client signs up, they're going to need to sign a disclosure form, so we'll need the functionality of allowing them to e-sign that document and archive that document. Now, milestone 5, very much like the client dashboard, we're going to need to have a reviewer dashboard, but the reviewer dashboard, we can use essentially the same dashboard, but the reviewers are typically going to have multiple different reviews going on at once, and I suppose a client could as well. We need to have a good way to organize that. So very much like the last milestone, we need a reviewer dashboard to be set up, and that will communicate with the client. And lastly, milestone 6 is the assistant having a dashboard. The assistant's also going to be one of the site members, and will have a different level of access. Essentially, the assistant will probably have the highest level of access in the sense that they'll be able to spell check and edit even the final review, and be able to put that final review on a PDF background so that it looks like a letterhead, and then flatten that and secure that document before sending it on to the customer. So here in the next segment, we're going to talk about the medical record. Each review needs to have a relevant medical record attached to it, and you could imagine some scenarios where the same patient has previously already had a medical record done on them, and thus we will just have the assistant appending that PDF. There's going to need to be a way for that assistant to find very quickly whether a patient has been reviewed before. And I think we basically need to, if we call the reviews themselves a task, we have to name those tasks after the actual patient that the review is based on. So there's going to need to be a workspace that holds data for each review, including the medical records. So typically there's not going to be any more than 5 files related to one review. Could be their main medical record, could be a couple attachments such as an x-ray, such as even a little video clip, the highlight form that the assistant creates. That's about it. So so you could envision even having that small list related to a task as something on the right hand margin of the screen that could easily be seen, clicked on, and comes up in a viewer for either the reviewer or the assistant to look at. Of course, we need to make sure that these tasks or reviews are clearly delineated so that the assistant or the reviewer doesn't start making an opinion based on different patient's data. So access rights, of course, need assigned for clients and reviewers. Versions of both the medical record and the review need to be stored so that the newest version can be seen, but also old versions can be viewed. That's just a quality assurance measure to make sure that if the assistants remove something that later on turns up being relevant, the original document could be pulled up. So the letterhead we talked about, essentially there'll be a scanned or faxed letterhead from each reviewer that will be the background for their specific review. So if Nurse Smith is writing a review, Nurse Smith would have a letterhead with her name and address and whatnot on that. Same thing, if it's Dr. Smith, his practice address and name and letterhead would be there, and that I envision that as being a watermark background for the PDF that's created. But however that's done, that's negotiable. So we talked briefly about the highlight form. The highlight form is something the assistant's going to use. It's going to have the demographics pulled, and the assistant will then actually call the patient and ask some additional details and pull some really basic data out of the medical record, so that when the reviewer looks at their template for whatever review this is, there's going to be a whole lot of things already ready for that reviewer. And we talked about the reviewers will have a template for basically each different scenario. So whatever drop-down menus will provide a draft template for the reviewer, but the reviewer can also save their own custom template. For instance, as far as the cause of carpal tunnel, they could write a letter regarding the cause of carpal tunnel, and then some of the personalized elements from the highlight form could be placed in there either manually by the assistant or maybe even eventually have that metadata go in automatically. So we talked about this already. So last we're going to talk about milestone 7 and payment system, but we're going to take a break before that.